Our Translate application is looking good, but we wrote out a whole lot of code that is a little bit mysterious, and I don't think we really have any better idea of how React works. So in this video, we're going to try to change that. I want to answer a couple of big questions you might have around React and the application that we just put together. The first big question we're going to go over is, what is React all about? React does two things for us. First, it displays HTML to our users, and number two, it changes that HTML over time as a user interacts with our application by clicking or typing or dragging stuff around. Even though we are using React, at the end of the day, it is still HTML that is causing content to appear on the screen of the user's browser. So we can kind of think of React as being like a wrapper around HTML of sorts. We tell React what content we want to show on the screen by creating functions that return JSX. JSX is this stuff that kind of looks like HTML. It's very similar, but also just a little bit different. We're going to go into great detail on JSX over time and get a better idea of how it's similar to HTML and how it is different. This JSX is what tells React about the individual elements we want to create on the screen and show to the user. So we create these functions that return JSX, we pass them off to React. React is going to look at that JSX right there and then say, oh, okay, looks like I need to create a div with an h3 inside of it. So if we try to show this JSX on the screen, I would expect to see a result that looks like this right here. Some big heading or an h3 element that says hello. These functions that return JSX are referred to as React components, and these are the primary way in which we work with the React library. So you and I are going to spend a tremendous amount of time inside this course writing out these components, writing out functions that return JSX. A single project can have many different components inside of it. For example, even the relatively small Translate app that we just put together, it was a pretty small app, it still had 5 different components inside of it. You and I were working on a component inside the app.js file, but there were 4 other components inside there as well. So there's one inside of languages.js, another one inside of Flower, another one Translate, and another one called Field. Each individual component is in charge of displaying content for a certain portion of the application. So for example, the Field component was responsible for showing just this text area at the very top. Languages was in charge of showing the list of languages. Translate was in charge of showing the translated output down here. And Flower was in charge of showing these kind of pretty little flowers on the top left and right hand sides. The goal of the app component is to coordinate all these others and kind of share information between them. We're going to spend a lot of time inside this course understanding how to coordinate the flow of information between different components and how to kind of coordinate them all together. All of the React components we create are going to return some JSX. And remember, JSX is the stuff that looks like HTML. These individual JSX tags are going to tell React to either create a normal HTML element and display it on the screen, like a div, a button, an input, and so on, or they are going to tell React to show another component. Let me give you a very quick kind of interactive example of this. So this is not the application we worked on. This is just a very small example. Up here, we've got an app component that returns a div, h1, and then it has a tag for contact list. Then down here is the actual contact list component. Let's imagine what would happen when React processes these two components and tries to generate some HTML that would be displayed on the screen. So here's what would happen. React is going to first call the app component, and it's going to get back this block of JSX right here. React is going to take a look at the first JSX element, which is the div, and it's going to say, okay, I need to create a div and show it on the screen. It will then move inside that div and see that it needs to display an h1 that says your friends. So it'll create another HTML element that says your friends, not your fiends. It'll then move on to the next element. This one says contact list. Notice that there's a very small distinction between the plain HTML elements, or the JSX elements that are intended to create HTML, and contact list right here. The difference between the two is that div and h1 begin with a lowercase character. A tag that begins with a lowercase character tells React that we want to make a plain HTML element. If a tag begins with a capital letter, that tells React that we want it to go and find another component inside of our app called contact list and try to show that component on the screen. So capital C contact list tells React to go and find this component right here, call it, get all of that thing's JSX, and show that JSX on the screen. So the final HTML that we would generate and show on the screen would have a UL right after that H1, and then inside there, the two LIs that say Samantha and Alex. This is an example of component nesting. It's where we show one component inside of another. We're going to use component nesting nonstop throughout this course, so we're going to get a lot of very good examples of it. That's it for question number 1. Before we move on to number 2, let's have a very quick quiz.